When Unreal was first released in 1998 for the PC, it helped to set a standard across the FPS shooters within the games industry as a whole, but it also, like the Quake series by ID Software, also helped to revolutionise the multiplayer aspect of first-person shooter games, as these two series were pretty much the direct competitors of each other, as they played in very similar formats and styles that focused more so on just run and gun type of gameplay aesthetics, while Quake did use a level based system to look for switches and different types of elements that you can use to progress, similarly seen in Doom. Unreal focused more on just deathmatch arenas for its campaigns, but the online multiplayer aspect would be the game's main feature. So it would be inevitable that the consoles in future generations, especially in the early 2000s, would gradually see a shift in this gameplay style and would opt for having ports of the Unreal game being added to the systems. And that happened in early 2000 with Unreal Tournament originally being released on Windows PC and then later ported then to the PlayStation 2 and Sega Dreamcast in 2000 and 2001. That would allow people that didn't have access to a PC to experience the whole frantic frenzy and gameplay style of this unique multiplayer style game that allowed you to literally just destroy everything in its wake and allowed you to play with your mates, and also had online capabilities as well, so that you could play with people across the globe, as online gaming was still relatively new at that point in time. But this game helped in many ways to solidify online gaming as a main practice, to allow people to reach further afield, way beyond that was ever thought possible in the games industry as a whole. With that being said, Unreal Tournament definitely revolutionised the FPS genre alongside of Quake. That set a standard that pretty much every game after it tended to follow. But what's so important about the Unreal series of games is that the engine that was used, as we all know today as the Unreal Engine, would be adopted to its own format that all of the mainstream games, even movies and everything that you see today, all CGI effects, and many games, when you look at even the likes of the iconic Batman Arkham series among many others, all use the Unreal Engine to develop all of the levels and features within the games. So that will tell you how revolutionary the Unreal Engine and even the original Unreal games were in terms of completely just changing the whole landscape of the video game space. But when we look at the console ports, while the game was very popular on the PC originally, back in 1998 there was some issues surrounding some of the multiplayer elements with regards to some of the processing features. So Epic Games also had to make add-on patches and kits for Unreal so that they could focus more on the multiplayer aspect so that you could have smoother gameplay. So this was also a feature that needed to be adopted into the Unreal Tournament games moving on, and especially on consoles. And with the console ports themselves, the games in general, especially with Unreal Tournament, and especially releasing in 2000, which in my own opinion was definitely the best possible time and the best era for FPS games, anything from the likes of 1996 all the way to 2001, 2002, when you had the likes of Quake, you had Duke Nukem 3D, you had Doom, you had Half-Life, and you had Unreal and a multitude of other iconic games that were all coming out at that point, and many of them, like Unreal and Quake, were all starting to focus on 3D environments and gameplay styles. So this would have been considered like the golden era of the FPS shooter, and it still holds strong even by today's standards, because when we look at a lot of these games being remastered or remade, if we look at recently with the Quake games being remastered for modern consoles with additional features and access to all of the original assets and packs that would have been only available through the likes of additional features that you would have had to spend extra money on back in the day, and now you can get them all at a relatively low price. Plus they all have their own inbuilt online features that work with the whole modern day multiplayer aspects, is a revolution in itself. Plus it gives people like us a chance to revisit these classics, but also for first time players to get a feel of what these games were originally like. So that is really cool. In saying that, however, with the likes of the console ports, like the game itself, Unreal Tournament, got massive reviews across the board. Pretty much every magazine praising the features within the games themselves, both on console and on the PC. But the PS2 would be the version that would get the lowest reviews across the board, and many of the reviewers stating that the graphics and just some of the capabilities just didn't hit home the same way as it did on the PC. Even the Sega Dreamcast, while it was a powerful machine, but it wasn't as powerful as the PS2, or so people thought back then, but it still managed to fully implement all of the features from the PC version to create pretty much the definitive version on consoles at that time. But the PS2 just fell a bit behind in that respect. But it doesn't take away from the fact is that it is a phenomenal game. As back in those days, like when we think about it, most people never had access to either a PC, and if we did have a games console, you might only have one. Some people might have had two if they were lucky, or what would happen is you'd have to sell one in order to get the other. You wouldn't have had the free access to get to them as you would today. So it was either one or the other. But whichever version that you played, you would have had a good experience. I know people say, and even in reviews, that the PS2 version is probably the weakest link in terms of all of the games provided, but it's still a very good experience. Now mind you, the controls, while they do use the dual analog sticks to move and to turn and to strafe and so forth, they can be a bit lackluster in terms of how it feels. Even from my own experience playing it, even playing it now years later, it's still not as fluent as it could have been. But we have to remember back, like, this game is 20 plus years old. Back in those days, the control systems were never as fully redefined like they are today, and they wouldn't have been as free flowing or as fluent. Like, you wouldn't have had the reaction speeds or be able to move as quickly, or have the adaptation times, like being able to move around, like using the right analog stick to turn and to look up and down. Whereas in today's games, that's just a normality, and it's just commonplace, and it's just a natural feel for it. But back then, that was still a relatively new system that still hadn't fully evolved at that time, and it would take a number of years in which to do so. But Unreal Tournament was proof that it was starting to set that process in motion, and it would inevitably lead on to some of the best multiplayer games that we now see today. So this game does hold its place in gaming history as one of the greats, regardless of which format that you've played it on. It's an epic game in all intents and purposes. So with this, you do have access to a multitude of different modes. You can play both multiplayer with your mates, but even in the single player campaign, the campaigns are pretty much deathmatch sequences where you have access to a map, and each map, it starts off pretty much where you have maybe one person extra that you have to kill. You have to kill so many players or get so many kills in a match to win. But each subsequent map that you will unlock as you play, you will then have to get more kills or get a certain amount of kills. Like in my case, I was playing the deathmatch mode with recording this video, and it got to a point when you unlocked all of the levels, you will unlock different characters as well, mind you, when you're playing, but you will have, say, a kill limit of, say, 25. So the first to reach 25 will win the match outright. But you have to play and win each match in order to unlock all of the additional features that the game has to offer. But then saying that, once you've gone through all of the 10 or 12 maps that are available in the game that you unlock through the deathmatch mode, you then need to get trophies then for the other modes. You need to then earn all of the wins on the assault mode. There's capture the flag, domination, team deathmatch, last man standing, alongside with the normal deathmatch. So all of those modes will require you to play through the game again, but using different gameplay mechanics, and will allow you to further unlock all of the additional elements, both characters and maps, pretty much everything that's available in the game. But you will need to play through all of those modes in order to do that. Now you can increase the difficulty, so obviously if you start off with easy, depending on your skill level, you'll find it adequately easy enough to get through. Especially if you're used to playing these type of games, you shouldn't have a problem. But it will ramp up if you decide to play it on the harder modes. That's when it will test you. But for most people that are veterans in this stage, will opt for that mode instead, because they will get the most out of it. But you have enough there to pretty much just change all the dynamics to suit your own play style and preferences. But I highly recommend Unreal Tournament. If you're a fan of this game, even with the Quake series or any of these original FPS classic deathmatch games, you won't really get much better than this. These are the pinnacle and set the standard for pretty much everything that you see today. Without these games, the FPS genre pretty much wouldn't exist, or it'd be very, very different in the grand scheme of things. And it still plays relatively well today, even though the control systems are a little bit on the slow, sluggish, and a little bit on times clunky side. But don't let that fool you. It's still a fantastic game to play. And it's funny, when you do sit down to play it, you'll find yourself gradually getting into it. Once you start getting a few wins under your belt, it will urge you to want to keep playing that a little bit more. I found that myself playing it, that after a while, I'm pretty much showing my age now, but I find that playing for a certain period of time, moving around, I had to take a break because my arms, wrists, fingers, everything were all sore. So that'll tell you. And that's because of the frantic nature of the game. I'm not used to playing games at that fast pace anymore, so I find that when I do play it, you kind of nearly have to set yourself up for it, because it takes a lot out of you. Let's just put it that way. These games are notorious for that, because everything is just mental. But if that's what you're into, and those are the type of games that you do like, this game will have that in abundance for you. It is a fantastic game. While there's not much of a story to it, but that doesn't matter. The gameplay alone is worth the experience, regardless of which format that you try it on. It is a fantastic piece of gaming history. So I would love to know your thoughts of Unreal Tournament for the PlayStation 2, or any type of format, whether it was on the Sega Dreamcast or the PC, and what are your fond memories of this unique game back in the day? Do you remember playing this with all your mates, or playing it multiplayer, or even playing like couch co-op, playing against each other? And what memories do you have of this here that you can share with everybody? I'd love to hear them, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. So if you'd like to see more content around other type of unique style games similar to Unreal Tournament that were also released on the PS2, then you can leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and also make sure to check out this playlist on screen to see more of those games in action. And I will see you all in the next one.
Congratulations, you are the winner.